The Washington Commanders tackled their defensive problems to get a big win in week 4. Now it's the Cleveland Browns' turn to try and tackle their own defensive problems against the Commanders in week 5. That and more coming up in this crossover episode of Locked On Browns and Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome in, Browns fans. Welcome in, Commanders fans, to this crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Commanders and Locked On Browns. Both shows part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm David Harrison. He is Jeff Lloyd. We are the hosts of the Locked On Commanders and Locked On Browns podcast, respectively. Your daily podcast covering each of these NFL teams that are facing off in week 5. And if you haven't already, you can subscribe for free wherever you're tuning in or listening in to today's episode, in which we're going to discuss why the air and ground games are going to dominate and dictate who wins this game. The Commanders are looking to stack in multiple areas, and the Cleveland Browns are looking to tackle some of their problems. And yes, that is a lot of puns that I'm using and all that stuff. But that's what we're going to do here on Crossover Thursday, presented to you by Prize Picks. Download the app, use the code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. And of course, we thank you for coming through today. Everydayers, we send you a special thank you for coming through every day. Jeff, I thank you for carving out time in your day to sit down with me to talk about this big week 5 matchup. I think for both sides, one side 3-1, one side 1-3. Each has a lot of reasons they want to come away with a win for this team. Let's start with that Cleveland Browns defense, though. What is the storyline on this defense? What is the biggest thing you're looking for out of that Cleveland Browns defense?
Well, that's one of the biggest things to talk about, because everybody wants to talk about the Cleveland Browns offense. Look, it's not that they are performing well, but the team as a whole is not performing well. And if you go back to last season, the Cleveland Browns defense, whatever defensive metric you wanted to use, they were either the first, second, third best defense in the entire NFL. That is simply not the case currently. 2 weeks ago, you lose a game and you make Daniel Jones actually look like, he's a quarterback that could have staying power for the New York Giants. You go to last week, you had some issues stopping the run, and it was a game where you went into the game. The Las Vegas Raiders could not stop the run. The Las Vegas Raiders through 3 games were unable to run the ball. And guess what they did? They ran the ball and they stopped the run. So, but on the defensive side of the ball, it's just not there right now. It's not clicking. I understand Myles Garrett is not 100%. He does have 4 sacks through 4 games. So you're getting your typical Myles Garrett production. He's still grading out very well. But the Browns almost were spoiled in 2023. I've been covering this team now. This is now my 8th season. This team never had a full defensive line. 2023, they had it, and they had it very well. And their defensive line was shutting down the running game. Their defensive line was harassing quarterbacks, and it was getting to the point where, they were able to just make things so much easier for the rest of their defense because their defensive line did so much heavy lifting. This year, it's not the case. Zadarius Smith, certainly another year older. They were hoping for maybe a jump from Alex Wright after a 5.5 sack season last year. That hasn't really come yet. I do have faith that Alex Wright is improving as a player. Their second-round pick, Mike Hall, he will not play in this game, but he will just get back to NFL action week 6, the first NFL action of his career. So he's not been able to contribute. Maurice Hurst has been out. They're taking, some guys from the practice squad have come up to play, which has not really been the case in 2023. These guys were all brand name players on this defensive line. The linebackers, you're struggling with tackling. And I think part of it is last year they were so dominant up front, kind of like when your running back hit the line of scrimmage, there was nowhere for him to go. So he was going to go down. What are you going to do? Bounce it out? There were guys there. Plus, they just got more hats to the ball. They attacked the ball. So, so much in the NFL. Look, there is a lot of missed tackles in the NFL. That's just basically a credit to how great the athletes are. Gang tackling, and it's having guys hats to the ball. Hats to the ball means we're going to get you down, because even if I only get a leg, there's somebody else going to get the upper body or grab an arm or whatever, and the guy is going to inevitably make it to the ground. Secondary, Denzel Ward has been absolutely fantastic. Martin Emerson, there's been a little regression. I think teams have kind of maybe found, one of the things with Martin Emerson, he's a great cornerback, but he's not a great athlete. So teams are kind of finding out, hey, there's ways we can maybe work this guy. If we get one-on-one in space with him, our guy should probably win. There's only so much he can cover up with length that's going to, cover up some of the, facts of, missing some of the athleticism he just doesn't have. So all 3 units can absolutely play better. It's been an issue this year. And there's not a unit on the Cleveland Browns right now where you can say, hey, well, they're good. Everybody is right now performing under their expectation, which gets you to a team, that can't score more than 20 points, can't throw for more than 200 yards, can't run for more than 100 yards. So your defense is inevitably, and they're not performing well, is inevitably on the field longer than they should be, which is, showing up for more weaknesses for them. It's just not a good look right now. And you come off the fact that even your last 2 games, even though the fact you played poorly for maybe 56 minutes plus, good
Mhm.
teams go out with one drive to win the game and go win it. And you know what? Even though we didn't play, look, Kansas City Chiefs shouldn't have won last week against the Chargers. They get that last drive, they go up 17-10. It makes the difference. They win the game. The Browns are not playing like a good team right now. You should be 3-1 right now. We should not be talking about a team that is 1-3.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And I mean, when you look at the laundry list of injuries, I mean, even going back to last season and the knee injury that Nick Chubb suffered, right? Like, this is a roster. I was actually just talking to another reporter today. Like, if you just look paper to paper, you say, okay, the Cleveland Browns have a better team. But when you look at what's happening on the field, the operation is just not fully there. And Martin Emerson, I'm glad you kind of brought him up. He's someone that I've been kind of looking at doing my pre-Brown study before we got here together. And I've already told Commanders fans, like, that is a guy that I think that this Washington Commanders offense can try to target, maybe go after. In fact, if I'm coaching Jayden Daniels, I'm saying, hey, recognize where Denzel Ward is, most likely in the left side of the defensive formation. Just don't go there. Whoever is there, sorry, dude, we'll get you next rep. But this rep, you're probably not getting the ball. Instead, we're going to go somewhere else because it's just too dangerous when you compare the other options. But of course, everybody wants to know about Myles Garrett, right? Didn't participate in practice Wednesday, listed with Achilles. My take, my assumption, not being on the ground, Jeff, is that he's a veteran. He's Myles Garrett. Unless he's just not walking, he's going to be on the field. What is your evaluation of Myles Garrett? Is
Well,
likely.
what the word seems to be is that when Myles Garrett was a kid, he actually had some foot injuries and actually had some surgeries on his feet when he was a kid. Obviously, it hasn't hampered him for probably close to a decade to this point. One of the greatest defensive line athletes has ever existed. Certainly one of the best defensive line athletes that's in the NFL today. It
Yeah.
sounds like it's something that's going to have to be addressed in the offseason. But
Okay.
all that being said, is Myles Garrett is now to the point of his career. If it's I ain't doing Wednesday. Okay,
Yeah.
I mean, he's earned that, and look,
Exactly.
Myles
Yep.
Garrett has done a lot of heavy lifting, put out a lot of effort for some really, really bad teams. So if this is what the Browns have to do, and look, last week, 2 sacks, it was, I think, was a highly, highly, graded out very well. He's one of the highest graded edges in the game right now, has most, and keep in mind, there's a lot of good pass rushers who have missed time to this point. So he's leading the league in pressure. So there's nothing affecting what Myles is doing on the field on Sundays.
Yeah.
But my guess is, and what it seems like, is the recovery going from Sunday to getting up to the next Sunday. It's a little
Mhm.
slower, and it sounds. And look, if this doesn't go the way Browns fans are hoping, maybe you shut them down a couple weeks early and get started on that. But that's not a conversation you're going to have now this early in the season. And even still,
Right.
that's something you'd have to get past Myles. Myles is a gamer. As great
He's
as an
gonna want to go out
individual
there.
player and athlete as he is, he's going to go out there and he's going to compete with his teammates. So it's not something I'm that concerned about whether or not he's going to be available on Sunday. Is he hampered? Is he playing less plays? Yeah, but I think that was always part of the plan for the Browns. They carry 5 edge rushers. All of these
Mhm.
guys, have some name value to them. The plan eventually, as he got later on his career, was let's get the big man some rest.
Yeah, you want to keep Myles as fresh as possible. The fresher Myles Garrett can be, the better off it is for the Cleveland Browns. You talked a lot about the offensive struggles as well as just the total team struggles. A lot of injuries on the offensive line. Another player though returning to practice on Wednesday, running back Nick Chubb. Again, I'm kind of the impression like this dude's been out of football for a long time. Horrific injury. There's no chance Nick Chubb is playing this weekend. Jeff, what are your thoughts?
I don't think so either. But I will say, first thing first, he's out there today at practice. There's nothing on the knee.
Yeah.
There's nothing. And it's like, are you kidding me? Because for what Nick Chubb has already gone through once and to go on to the NFL career he has had is absolutely amazing. Now,
Yeah.
anything he can do after this happening for a second time is probably doubly amazing. I don't think he comes back. I don't even know if he comes back next week in Philly. You'd think
Really?
that sweet spot would probably be the following week at home, Cincinnati. You can't rush him. Even if you need him, which they do, you have to have some sort of conscience and some sort of heart that what he went through. But then could become the tricky part of you could be looking at 2-4. You could inevitably be looking at 1-5. Ideally, you want to be 3-3, but of course, I'm talking about a team that I think should be 3-1 right now. But I think this week is just to start getting them out there, getting them back into kind of the flow. But I have to believe the realization of him playing Sunday is it would be, if we were going to put a percentage on it, it would be single digits and lower than 5.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So expect to see Myles Garrett out there. Expect to not see Nick Chubb out there, though we do all hope to see Nick Chubb on the field sooner rather than later. What a great moment that's going to be. On the Washington Commanders side of things, there's a lot of things we're expecting to see as well. And we'll flip over the side of this competition coming up next on today's Crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Commanders and Locked On Browns, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's Crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Commanders, Locked On Browns is brought to you by Game Time. And Game Time now has a new feature called Game Time Picks. And that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier than ever. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you the incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of ticket options. Curated deals make it easier for you to find the best price on great seats. For example, my Game Time Picks here in the DMV feature tickets to see the Cleveland Browns visiting the Washington Commanders for $73, or I can go see the Boston Bruins visiting the Washington Capitals for $79. And with all-in pricing toggled on the app, I get all of my prices up front, so there are no surprises at checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create your account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Continuing on now with today's episode of Locked On Browns, Locked On Commanders crossover Thursday, Cleveland visiting the Washington Commanders. And as Jeff has just discussed with us here today, Cleveland Browns have a lot of things to clean up, and Washington Commanders fans are empathizing with Browns fans to right now, Jeff, because a lot of the things that you just said in that first segment are things that they've heard me say because they've been everydayers for years now, and we've been through this process together. But what nobody really saw coming was this Washington Commanders process, Adam Peters, Dan Quinn, bringing in Jayden Daniels and having the success they've had so far. 3-1 out of the gates, out of the first quarter. And I think offensively, the biggest story obviously has to be Jayden Daniels, right? He just won the Nickelodeon Slime Time Player of the Week. I can't remember exactly how they call it, but hopefully you know what I'm talking about. We saw him and a couple of his offensive linemen get slimed because of that honor. He just got the Hemi trophy from Van Pelt on ESPN, and he got the FedEx Aaron Ground Player of the Week award. So there's a lot of people feeling Jayden Daniels these days. So the key for the Washington Commanders is for Jayden Daniels and his offense to not get feeling themselves as much as other people are feeling them. And Jayden was asked about a lot of that stuff on Wednesday and earlier in the week. He's going to get asked a lot about that, we think, during his career as it continues on, if he can stay on this trajectory. And he kind of put it in the way that he's always put it, Jeff, which is it's another game. It doesn't matter what you did before. It doesn't matter what he did at LSU. The Heisman Trophy isn't going to win him any games in the NFL. But the thing about it is some people say it. When Jayden says it, you actually believe it. And then you see him in the locker room later with all the trophies around. And, you know, he does his pictures and he does the smile and everything and the appreciative thing. And he is actually appreciative. But you can tell that, okay, now the trophies are put away. Now the pictures are done. Now what do we need to do to prepare for the Cleveland Browns? That's where his focus is. And I think that is kind of that veteran sense in a rookie. Maybe it's because he's a little bit of an older rookie that really has kind of taken hold with the Washington Commanders and with Jayden Daniels. So Jeff, when you look at Jayden Daniels, what is your impression of this rookie quarterback? What kind of challenge do you think he presents to this Browns defense?
Now, this is actually interesting because, when the schedule first came out, my thought was this is probably the spot where you maybe want to get the Commanders. Look, Quinn's got a lot of respect in the league. When he opened up free agency, you saw a lot of guys that had an affiliation to him run for the opportunity to go to Washington to continue playing with him. And then the selection of Jayden Daniels, I was like, all right, well, if you're going to want to get Washington, you're probably going to want to get him early because this team's going to play hard. It may take a couple of weeks. It's come even faster than that. But of course, 2 weeks ago, I'm sitting down, I'm, watching Monday Night Football. I want to make sure the Cincinnati Bengals lose. Hey, Jake. Hey, James. How you guys doing? And he goes out there and has an absolutely unreal night for a rookie on the road on Monday Night Football. Okay, fantastic. 6 days later on the road again against a former Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, all the good thing, all the bells and whistles, and goes into Kyler Murray's house and does the same thing to him. You see, and you saw where he was at in the Tampa game, and it was, you saw it was there. A lot of the stuff was there, but it really looked, and everybody, oh well, rookie quarterback week one. Yeah, we've seen some really, really colossal week one rookie quarterback flops. He didn't look like a flop that day, He looked like a guy that just wasn't there yet. And, gets his feet under him, gets a win over the Giants, then plays those two phenomenal road games. He's really special. And, you don't want to say it. And I know a lot of people have put it out there. Like, you don't want to compare a lot of guys to Lamar, but I think there's a huge, huge difference. Jayden
Yep.
Daniels is light years past. And it's more to his credit and less than what the Ravens did for Lamar Jackson. He is light years past as a passer in a passing offense with Washington already than where Lamar Jackson was when he was first starting out with Baltimore. It was really, what Lamar could do with his legs, and then we'll throw it because everybody expects him to run. It's not the same case. Jayden Daniels runs very well. That's usually plan B or plan C, where, hey, he ran around the pocket, didn't work, had to go out and just get the yards on his own. Jayden Daniels is going to be a special talent. I think there's still, it's going to be a good year for Washington, but also part of this is going to be, what exactly don't we have for him yet? What does he need to finish this all off? But it's been remarkable. And I have a lot more weak knees thinking about this game than I certainly did when the schedule first broke. Certainly about the summer. Certainly after week one. But those two road performances, you cannot deny that. And it's really hard to think that the kid's going to just show up looking like a rookie at home. But this is a challenge for Jim Schwartz. You are one of the people refer to you as one of the best defense coordinators ever existed, and their defense should be better than the Cardinals. Their defense certainly is better than the Cincinnati Bengals. So go out there and show that you should be able to rattle this rookie's cage a little bit. I'm not confident it'll happen, but that certainly should be the game plan.
Yeah, I mean, truthfully, I think this is the best defense that the Commanders have faced since that Tampa Bay game in week one, at least, on paper, schematically, the challenges that it can present and all that stuff. And I know the New York Giants defense certainly has been the strength of their unit, but they're running that defense and using those personnel in much different ways, just didn't create as much of a threat. I don't think against Jayden Daniels in week two than maybe what we all kind of expected. And because of that, you are curious to see, like, okay, the last time we saw Jayden Daniels against this type of a defensive coordinator with this type of a reputation and all that stuff, to now, you're right, it's light years away. Like week one seems like an age ago. And to your point, Lamar Jackson in his first four games as a starter, first of all, he didn't get his first start till week 10 of his rookie season. Jayden was doing a week one of his rookie season, and Jayden's numbers far surpassed Lamar Jackson's numbers as an individual quarterback. Both of them 3-1 in their first four games. And that's okay to say without disrespecting what Lamar has become since then. We're just talking first four games here. Any Ravens fans that happen to be getting lost.
This isn't a knock on Lamar. This is a pat on the back for what Jayden Daniels is doing to this point.
Exactly. And defensively for the Washington Commanders, everything you just said, Jeff, going into this Commanders game about the Browns defense is what I was saying about the Commanders defense going into that Cardinals game, which to the Cleveland Browns fans' benefit shows you just how much can change in 1 week's time, because coming into last week, the Washington Commanders were not getting any sack production. One game against Kyler Murray, they get 4 sacks in one game. They get a takeaway. They get a turnover. Their tackling problems, I don't want to say they didn't miss any tackles, but their tackling problems certainly looked a lot more shored up. They were able to contain a quarterback like Kyler Murray. So these things can change sometimes on a dime. But of course, the Washington Commanders are hoping that their change of fortune in week 4 doesn't turn back to what it was in week 3, 2, and week 1 against this Cleveland Browns offense, because you face another quarterback in Deshaun Watson, who maybe isn't talked about as much as a fluid quarterback, a mobile quarterback that can get out of the pocket and cause some problems for teams. But he is still a quarterback that if this Commanders defense doesn't play disciplined like they did against Arizona, and maybe plays a little bit less disciplined like they did against Cincinnati, which granted, Cincinnati, you can get away with it a little bit more. Joe Burrow, not quite as athletic. But if you get that version of this Washington Commanders defense, the concern is that this is going to be a get-right game for the Cleveland Browns, and they're going to have the opportunity to get one of those wins that maybe they should have been able to secure in the weeks prior.
Yeah, no, it's certainly what you're looking for. And, the play of Deshaun Watson, I think is, last week was, pretty good. You can take the touchdown off the board, but he still made the play. And, then all of a sudden now you're talking 250 yards, the big drop by Amari Cooper that led to an interception. That was going to be a 25, 20, maybe a 30-yard reception. Now you're knocking closer to 300 yards on the day. So it's been improved. I guess, fans, whatever, you can't, I thought he played well. I still thought he could have managed the last play better. I just thought the way the coverage looked, you really knew that you were going to have that guy open in the dead center of the end zone. Deshaun, granted, was pressured heavily, but sometimes you got to understand and you got to dictate the way you're looking at pre-snap coverage and say, well, I've only got 1.5 seconds. I don't have 2. And he had about 1.85. And in that 1.85, In my opinion, I think he would have been able to see that it was going to be 3-on-2 on the left side as far as defenders versus receivers, which meant that Jerry Jeudy was going to be wide open, just basically running towards, the goalpost. He didn't see it. Pressure got to him. He didn't make a play whatsoever. Obviously took the sack. But, Deshaun is playing well. The problem is we need everybody else to kind of get on board.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are things that are going on with the Washington Commanders, with the Cleveland Browns heading into this matchup. But what are the three things that each side of this matchup has to do in order to come away with that crucial Week 5 win? We'll get into that coming up next on this crossover episode of Locked On Browns and Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're going to do that thanks to our friends over at FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start this season big with a return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game that you're watching, or Red Zone, if you're watching Red Zone, you can check out the latest stats, view the play-by-play updates, and get so much more on the exact same page where you place your bets. You can place your pregame bets there. You can also place your in-game bets there if that's more your style. Either way, you can also get started at FanDuel with a $200 bonus bet guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. The Commanders are favored for only the second time this season, currently at home, projected to beat the Cleveland Browns by 3 points. So if you think that the Cleveland Browns are going to cover that spread, if you think the Washington Commanders are going to cover that on their end, place that first $5 bet and you'll get a $200 bonus bet guaranteed no matter the outcome. The over-under on that game, 43.5 points. So if that's more your speed, go for that. Either way, take full advantage of this latest opportunity by going to FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Commanders and Locked On Browns crossover Thursday here, brought to you by Prize Picks. And Jeff, there is a chance for the Cleveland Browns to overcome this massive 3-point spread that they have got ahead of them. What three things must they do in order to become the underdog winner on Sunday?
Well, first things first, one of the advantages they've had to this point is they seem to be playing a little bit better on the road than they are at home. Certainly less pressure, when you're not trying to satisfy all 70,000 of your fan base. But it's because things are not going well. It sounds silly, but it's simplicity, really. This team hasn't yet to throw for 200 yards. So there's been 2 games where Washington's given up over 300 yards, or there's been 2 games where Washington has given up less than 200 yards. You want to be closer to that 300 number, but I will take north of 200. They have not done it yet. It's going to help the defense tremendously. They're not running the ball consistently, and there's a million factors. Obviously, Nick Chubb not being there is one of them. The fact that every week we go into this, and up until about Friday, we don't even know who the starting offensive line is going to be. Sometimes it's even Sunday. So when you're talking about a new system with a new offensive coordinator, a new offensive line coach, revolving doors at who's playing what position. Joe Bitonio's played left guard and he's played left tackle. Ethan Posick has been injured. He's played center and he's played left guard. You've had guys that have played left tackle and right tackle. Wyatt Teller is out. Zach Zinter is currently your starting right guard. So it's really hard in a new system with a new offensive line coach to get any cohesion going. And yeah, in those scenarios, it's probably easier to pass block than it is to make your run game work, because run game, it's just got to be consistency. The more reps you get, the better it comes. And it's just kind of really been an issue to this point. You look at a couple of games, the numbers might be skewed. Oh, well, they ran for X amount, yards per carry. Well, no, against Jacksonville, Jerome Ford had a really long run, saved that number, made it look better than it did. Last week against Las Vegas, had another big run that made those numbers look better than they actually were. You've got to run the ball, get over 100 yards. And most of this is done because you got to get the defense off the field. And this has been a problem even last year when the Browns defense was really good. The longer they played, the weaker they got. Obviously makes a lot of sense. The other thing is, though, the last 2 games, Cleveland Browns have had over 10 missed tackles against the New York Giants and 10 missed tackles against the Las Vegas Raiders. You want to look simply as to why you did not win either of those games. That comes down to it. Obviously, one game was I think it was a 5-point loss. Last week was a 4-point loss. It's simple. I mean, and these are things that make differences. They extend drives. All of a sudden, a 3 and out, is it a 7-play drive, or what would have been a 5-play, 6-play drive is now all of a sudden double digits. And then your defense is getting taxed, and now it's more pressure on the offense. It's just simple things. And these are things that this team has not done to this point. They need a collective effort. They got plenty of collective efforts last year, but there hasn't been a game yet where you could say, all right, this was good, this was good, this was good. You always seem that, when you get to it, and certainly get to it the second time of the All-22, you just seem like you're trying to find more out of this team. And it's kind of frustrating because the expectations for this team was sky high. We got some talk over the summer that, hey, maybe it's not looking so great, but everybody tried to justify it. Well, Amari Cooper's kind of sitting in, not everybody's practicing. Your top 3 offensive tackles aren't doing much, but you want to know what? Maybe it did mean something. And because this team is kind of slow coming out the gate, and if they can't get it right this week, the question is going to be, now all of a sudden you're scrambling really hard, went over about a 12 game pace over the last 13 weeks. And look, the AFC may be close. It may, may be a lot of parity, but eventually teams are going to start separating themselves, and the Browns need to get closer to this pack, like as quickly as they possibly can. Or, you're asking for, a very, very high win to loss, to close out the season to have a chance to get to the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. For the Washington Commanders, man, I mean, some of it needs to be, continue doing what they're going to do. So right now, the Washington Commanders are +1 differential in the turnover department. And if you think that heading into week 5, you're probably thinking, okay, they're getting some turnovers, but they're also turning the ball over. Well, it turns out they've actually only turned the ball over once. The problem is they're not getting any turnovers. So offensively, continue to protect the ball. Only 1 turnover, 1 interception. Last week, it was Jaden's first interception of his career. Continue to protect the ball. Don't continue to throw interceptions. Continue to not throw interceptions. Defensively, they've only got 2 takeaways, both of them coming on fumbles. Now, they have forced another fumble. They weren't able to recover that one, but they are trying to kind of get heated in the takeaway department. So defensively, you want to see those pick up. You want to see them get their hands on an interception if possible against Deshaun Watson. And certainly, if you're forcing fumbles, you want to recover those. And then holistically, the Washington Commanders coming off of their best team win on record. That those words, according to head coach Dan Quinn. Granted, it's only 4 weeks, but let's see them get a full phase game going again. Special teams. I want to see them flip the field. I want to see Austin Seibert continue to make his kicks and do all those great things, and see all 3 phases of this Washington Commanders team come up big in a week 5 win. So if each side can accomplish those things, then they should be in pretty good position to come out with a win. Browns fans, Commanders fans, we appreciate you for coming through for this crossover Thursday episode. Next up, make sure you check out Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is kicking off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso, and then you head to the barbershop in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. It's the all-new Locked On NFL, and it is twice per day, as always. Thank you for making Locked On Commanders or Locked On Browns your first view or listen today and every day. Everydayers, thanks for coming through like you do. Jeff and I both each have at least 1 episode left to wrap up the week. So make sure you're coming back to Locked On Commanders and Locked On Browns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.